Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Let's Hash It Out podcast. I'm your host, Forrest, also known as Hashoshi on YouTube. On this podcast, we're all about next generation tech with a special focus on blockchain and cryptocurrency. You'll get the latest news, concise education, fun interviews, and product reviews all in one fun audio experience. So let's hash it out. So today, guys, I wanted to bring in a special guest to bring your questions into the spotlight. Take those questions, I'll answer them, we'll have a good time. And after this video, please do submit more questions in the comments down below. So let's dive into the questions you guys asked on Twitter, over email, etc. This is my girlfriend, Alex. She's gonna be reading the questions and asking them to me. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Alex. Alex, these are the kind people of YouTube.
Hi, Hash Nation. Nice to meet you all. I am here to be Forrest's interviewer today. So, let's go to Twitter. So someone asked, if you could rename the word Bitcoin to anything of your choice, what would you pick? It's a good question.
It sounds cliche, but I would probably name it sound money. Money that is not inflationary, money that can't be controlled by one single organization and printed into oblivion. That would be what I would call it.
Okay, fair. Second, can Bitcoin scale to thousands of TPS without changing the proof of work mechanism?
Cool. So for
What is TPS?
transactions per second. So
Okay.
the big topic that everyone likes to talk about in blockchain, especially in platforms like Bitcoin, is, can it scale? And scaling means how many transactions per second can it handle? Because Visa, they claim that in their transaction network, they can handle in the tens of thousands
per
second
Yeah.
all over the world.
Right.
And so people often use that as a way to take down Bitcoin and criticize Bitcoin as a payment method. And so to answer that question, and what was the name of the person who asked that question?
Philip.
Philip John Santiano. Thank you for the question.
Cool name.
Yeah, very cool name. I think that the answer is it depends. I think that with proof of work, you're not going to speed up the process of mining transactions much more than we already have without modifications. So there might be modifications to proof of work in the future. There are little things like segregated witness, like we saw in the Bitcoin network, that help make the transactions smaller in size. So you can fit more in each block, which then ups the overall transaction per second count. But the answer probably is no. Without a proof of work modification, it's not going to scale that base level. However, layer 2 solutions that sit on top of the blockchain, like Lightning Network, for example, are a great way to add transactions per second to the mix, even if they're not on that main blockchain with proof of work. So that would be my answer.
That was a really good answer, and that completely went over my head. For all the people who have no clue what the hell proof of work is, can you explain that?
Yeah,
to
so
me?
for anyone who doesn't know what proof of work is, it's the consensus mechanism that is used on the Bitcoin blockchain amongst others. And what proof of work is, it's basically a mechanism by which miners, those special nodes on the network, go and prove that they've done the work to add a block to the blockchain.
Gotcha.
It's a very random process in the sense that miners are computing these random values iteratively. They're kind of stepping through these cryptographic puzzles or math puzzles to find an answer within a certain range that's defined by the protocol.
Okay, and another question, this one's for me. Do you have to have a specific computer to be a node? Or can you can you use your computer here? Can you use an iPhone?
Using an iPhone is tough because it takes up a fair bit of space to collect the entire blockchain network. So one of the prerequisites to having a node, and prerequisite's the wrong word, one of the things that comes with running a full node is that you become a keeper of a full copy of the entire blockchain ledger, right? So as a node, it downloads all of that. And to be quite honest with you, it's not as crazy massive as people think. It's still in the gigabytes. We're not in terabytes of data yet.
Okay.
So it's reasonable, but by that same standard, you probably don't want to have that running on your phone and eating up that juice, because what's happening is, as a full node, you're connecting to other peers on the network because it's a peer-to-peer network.
Okay.
And so you're sharing your copy of the ledger and your state, basically what you see the network as, with people that are your nearest neighbors, so other nodes.
Okay.
And so it's a very active process for your computer. You don't have to do anything, but if you run that software on your computer and you connect to the other Bitcoin core nodes on the network, other peers, you're running a node.
Okay, another stupid question. I'm sure all of Hash Nation gets this, for the people who don't. And it's going to sound really stupid. Do you go on like a website to like code? Like, do I type in like, I know this is gonna be really stupid, like blockchain.com? Like, is it an app? Is it a software? Like, how do you start coding? Like, I come in here and there's like a bunch of lines of code. I'm like,
right. So
how'd you get that?
Coding is one thing, running a node is another. Running a node is all about having the same software as the other nodes on the network, the other peers. Okay. So a blockchain is really formed when a bunch of different people in geographically separate locations with different computers all run the same software.
Okay.
That establish a protocol of how transactions are going to be created, how blocks are mined. They have all these rules set up, and they all agree on a certain
consensus.
Sort of. Early on, you agree on like what the protocol is. You all run the same software. Okay. So then you become peers to each other in the same network. You know, the difference between a blockchain and a traditional server architecture like you have with Facebook is that when you talk to Facebook, every request that you make for content goes from your phone, which is the client, over to their server, which is the server. They take your request, they serve you the content, and it passes it back to your phone. Okay. In a peer-to-peer environment like a blockchain, your computer then becomes a server and a client. You're consuming information from other people,
right,
and you're providing information to other people.
Right.
So that's what a peer-to-peer network is. So when you want to run that or when you want to be a part of a blockchain, you run the same software as other people, so you can become a peer in an agreed upon protocol, and that's how that works. And then coding-wise, really a lot of what's happening is you're creating software that can then interact with that protocol. So there are established sort of methods that you can use to interact with these different blockchain networks, and those are called APIs, application programming interfaces. Okay. So it's sort of like an interface that you can build your own application with a user interface to then talk to the blockchain, right? So whenever people are coding, usually that's what's happening.
Oh, okay, cool. Dig it. For smart people, but still dig it. All right, crypto terp. Interesting.
Right on.
I just want to buy and store / spend crypto quickly, easily, and safely. How and with what?
Cool. So there are a bunch of different options. I think my favorite option right now to spend crypto, there are actually two of them. One of them is Blue Wallet. You can use that with the Lightning Network. Basically, that creates a little payment channel that you can send amounts of Bitcoin to buy things. And there are stores now that are starting to integrate with
like you
Lightning
can use
Network.
it?
Right. And so you can buy a coffee with that. And it's fast enough because it's sort of a layer above the Bitcoin blockchain, but then feeds into that as a transaction later. Okay. So it's sort of like you're setting aside transactions, you're making a bunch of transactions, and you're feeding that final balance to the blockchain instead of all the transactions that you made. And so Lightning Network is great for those small, quick payments where you don't want to wait for a block to get mined in Bitcoin. So that's one way, and that's the really true using Bitcoin or using crypto as a payment method directly. And so a lot of people like that. But I also think that one of the most powerful solutions out there right now is the Crypto.com, formerly Monaco, Visa debit card. So what you can do is you can download their app, you can get their card. There's a bunch of different options. I'm gonna make a separate video completely about this, but high level, you get this card and it allows you to use your cryptocurrency all in that wallet, fund your card with whatever your fiat currency is locally, and then purchase things normally. So just today, I paid to get my state inspection for my car with Bitcoin because I didn't have any other method of payment with me. I didn't have any other cards. I didn't have any cash with me. So it was one of those things where I had Bitcoin. I always have Bitcoin on my phone, so I could go ahead and pay with that card. So I really do like that, even though you're not sending a vendor or a person who's giving you a service Bitcoin directly, you can still pay with your crypto, and it's still moving crypto in general. So I still feel that that's really valuable.
Cool.
Great question.
That is a good question. Another question I have, you're speaking of transactions and Visa. Like, you know how when we go to like the grocery store or whatever, or I go to like Forever 21 and like they have to pay like a certain % of that to Visa or Amex, whatever. Mm-hmm. If companies were to accept Bitcoin or whatever cryptocurrency, do they have to pay like Coinbase or something?
It depends. There are services that you can get out there today where you can pay them to sort of be a custodian. They take care of the software, they take care of the keys, they integrate it with your payment terminals, they do everything for you.
Right.
In that case, yeah, you're going to pay a fee because they're a service, right?
What about, like, what's the cost? Like, something like that versus Visa, is it comparable? Like, is that why a lot of companies haven't adopted, I can't go to my corner store and use Bitcoin? Like,
Well,
is it too expensive for them to
I don't
do
think
it?
the issue is expensiveness. I think the issue is that it's a volatile asset. So when you receive Bitcoin for a cup
Right.
of coffee, you've established what your costs are.
Right,
There's a significant chance that you're going to make more money than what you just got.
Right.
But unless you convert it out to your fiat currency of the day,
Right.
you're not going to be able to lock in profits or lock in and understand where your losses are coming from.
Well, it's like that guy who bought a pizza.
He bought a pizza that's
with a
worth
Bitcoin
millions,
and
right?
and same with like
Yes.
50 Cent. Like 50 Cent's already like a G and a millionaire or whatever. But that dude had like 5 Bitcoin. He sold it all. He's like, damn. So
Yeah, no, and I think
think
that's
that.
the reason why people haven't adopted it, in addition to the fact that it's still not very well understood.
Yeah.
So businesses,
I get
there are
that.
still businesses today that don't accept credit because they don't want to pay the fees. They don't understand why you need that. They're a cash business because they like cash.
And you get like a discount. Like they'll
Right.
give me like, I'll go to like the bakery around the corner for us, and they'll give me like a 4% cash back because
Right.
maybe they pay like 5%.
Because
to
for
Visa or
small
whatever.
businesses,
Yeah.
like my barber, for example, they don't accept credit because it costs them too much to accept it,
Right.
So that's one of the solutions, hopefully, that crypto brings, is we can give more equitably costed solutions for payment processing.
Totally don't get this one. Bitboy.
Len Moon.
Yeah, what does that mean?
Yeah, so this question comes
Don't
up
know
all
what
the
that
time, and that's
Wait,
basically
that's an actual thing?
when is Bitcoin going to the moon, right? When are we going to get those
Oh.
crazy prices? And the answer is, I have no idea. No one can ever predict that.
Tomorrow.
I would hope so. If it's tomorrow, I'll be more than stoked about it. But the reality is, no one knows. No one can ever guess where the prices are going and when.
It's like predicting stocks. It's like, how are you supposed
And
to be
it's
able
even
to do
harder than
that?
predicting stocks because it's a smaller market.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of crazy stuff that goes on behind the scenes that we don't even know about.
When do you think, okay, let me think about this. When do you think we're going to reach Bitcoin being 100 grand? Just a random estimate, like that you could be like completely off.
Yeah, no, I'm pumped because I've at least rubbed off on you in that way. You think that that's happening.
Well, whatever. You keep on saying, like, I'm not technical, I don't know.
I think about it from the scarcity perspective is that, we're coming up on the next halving. We
Halving.
just had one for
I know
Litecoin.
what that is.
Boom.
Know what
She
that
watches
is.
my videos. But we are moving towards that halving in 2020 where that block reward is going to get cut in half again. So the creation of Bitcoins is going to slow down again by 50%. So that's in the inflation of the overall supply of Bitcoin
Right.
year over year is going to decrease again. And that's going to happen several times until the supply constraint reaches its finality, right? The final Bitcoin is mined.
When is do we have a date when this halving is
I mean,
occurring?
it's
Is there a date?
years and years and years away. There is a date, and I can't place it in my
What
head
about
right now.
the halving that you said is happening in 2020? What's the date for that?
The halving, it's approximately mid 2020. I think it's May 2020, but don't quote me on
But
that.
is there like who decided this?
So this is all set forth in the protocol at the very beginning.
Do you like
of
read it? You know,
Bitcoin.
like the terms of service that you always skip through. Is there like a manual?
The code is the terms of service for Bitcoin. So basically, there is a very well-defined piece of code that says every 210,000 blocks that are mined, which equates to a certain number of years. It really depends on how fast blocks get mined. But
Damn.
every 210,000 blocks in Bitcoin, a halving occurs.
Oh, okay.
Right? In Litecoin, it's every 840,000 blocks. So you have this set forth in the protocol, and the whole reason for that is understanding that mining is a core principle and a core way that the network is secured.
Yeah.
And you don't have banks that you're paying a fee to do
do
work,
for
right?
you, yeah.
To validate transactions and to prove that things are correct, right?
Right.
And so miners have to be paid. And miners also have to stick around because the more total miners there are contributing computing power, the more secure the network is. So how do you incentivize them to stay? You have to keep that Bitcoin price moving in a relatively steady trajectory over time.
Because if it's going to go down, who's going to do it?
Right. If it
Costs
goes
too
down,
much.
they'll want to, like, they have the stockpile of Bitcoin that they've collected. They will want to get rid of that, and they'll want to stop mining.
Yeah.
So you want to keep them mining, and that's why halvings were set up, to sort of force the hand of investors and speculators that, hey, there's more scarcity, it should be priced higher, right?
This dude, Satoshi, right?
Dude, girl,
Smart.
group, alien, no one knows who
it's
or
a
what.
woman. She's smart.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, next. Why should I give up my billions of hard-earned money to invest in thin air? Honestly, that's a fair question. That's like not a hater thing. Like, for someone like me who's not technical, I get it.
Right.
So,
no, I think it's the same. It's the same question that you pose when people use U.S. dollars or other reserve currencies of the world, right?
Yeah.
90% of these fiat currencies that we use every day and that we live our lives on are backed by nothing, right? They're backed by nothing.
But is it? Like,
they're backed by nothing tangible.
Yeah, but like, for example, like, I know my grandfather always says, like, American money, like, you go anywhere, people accept American money, like,
yeah, it's backed
by, like...
It's backed by the power of a nation, it's backed by fear, and I get that.
Yeah.
But the reality is that there's also no control to the supply of that money.
Yeah, no,
right?
I agree with that. I mean, they can just inflate it whenever they want.
We're passengers in that. And to me, it has nothing to do in any way, shape, or form with, like, this, you know, anarchist stuff. It's really all about the fact that the money systems that we have don't work for people. They don't work for what we do. And it's been a platform on which companies and governments, to an extent around the world, have been able to manipulate people and other countries and profiteer off of people's, you know, really unalienable right to use money, to trade, to work with each other, and to send money to other places. I mean, we're in this place in time where we have such amazing technology, but it costs way too much. Like, I can't send money to family in another country.
I will say one thing. Forrest was explaining to me about blockchain or whatever, because when I used to live in Canada, I moved here, met this guy.
Hence the Molson Canadian. People always ask if I'm Canadian, where I live in Canada. I don't live in Canada. I'm from Washington, D.C.
From the sick side, though.
But she's from Toronto. Got that sign in Toronto. Fun place.
Yeah, so anyways, when I was here going to school, my parents would send me money for rent or whatever it would be. It would cost them hundreds of dollars to send me money. And not only that, it would take like 5 to 7 days. So I would have to give them like 2 weeks notice for them to send me money, for them to have to go to the bank, pay them, and then it would literally all the time get delayed. And I was saying, like, what can be done? And, you know, Forrest is talking about the fact that blockchain has kind of enabled that to not be as a slow of a process, a more transparent process, but also not cost. Or at least not cost to the extent.
Right, and that's the goal, is it's supposed to not cost as much, right?
Yeah.
There's always got to be a fee because someone's got to do the work.
Someone's got to do the work, yeah.
You know, people have advertised blockchain solutions, especially Bitcoin, as like this feeless, free, open, completely without any caveat system, and that's not the case. You always have to pay a fee because that's the way economics work, right?
Yeah, true. Okay, next. I'm gonna pronounce this wrong, so I'm sorry. Digilight 2020. Is he running for president? Maybe.
Cool.
Should I put my money into UTXO blockchain projects or not? What is that?
Gotcha. Okay, so I realize I also didn't fully answer the last question. Why would you invest in thin air? The reality is that cryptocurrencies, by and large, are not all valuable. Cryptocurrencies, amongst the thousands that there are, only a select handful have like really sound economics. Bitcoin is one. There's true scarcity. There's a true community behind it. It's secured by the people who believe in it. And I believe that that's why it has value. It's a scarce asset with a solid demand. And I only believe that that demand is going to go up along with the scarcity as well, and increasing over time. That's a recipe for value. Not financial advice, just telling you my opinion.
100K, bro. Invest.
Hopefully. Yes, don't say that on camera. I'm just teasing you.
Oh my God.
No, people get really particular about, you know, this isn't financial advice. No one wants to get in trouble.
Don't take my advice. I have no clue what I'm doing. Don't, seriously. Imagine like some person's like, oh, she's doing bad. So
there are people that are far less qualified telling people to invest in stuff.
Yeah,
don't worry.
do that stuff, guys. UTXO, I don't know what that is, but you can tell me.
Yeah, UTXO is an unspent transaction output blockchain. That is the same structure as what Bitcoin uses. So instead, when you have a bank account,
so it's
right?
not a crypto?
It is a cryptocurrency. Unspent transaction output is the method by which the accounting on the Bitcoin blockchain is done, right?
I'm sorry, that's like super confusing.
Well, I'm going to explain it to you. So when you have an account with a bank, right?
Yeah.
You have a statement period, and throughout that statement period, you have debits and credits, right?
Yeah.
You can always access what happened in the past, but you're carrying this, you have this sort of balance that you're working from. And they're keeping track of all future balances based on the previous one from your last statement, right?
Yeah.
That's an account-based system.
Okay.
In a UTXO, or an unspent transaction output model, your balance is calculated rather by the overall sort of summation of all of the unspent transactions that you have in your account, right?
Okay.
So when you're going to spend Bitcoin,
yeah,
you don't pull from a number balance. It's like 2.5 Bitcoins, and then you can send 0.2. Instead, if you've received 1 Bitcoin from someone, you received 0.25 Bitcoin from someone, and then 1 Bitcoin from someone else.
Mm-hmm.
That's 3 unspent transaction outputs in your account.
Right.
Your total balance is 2.25, but it's composed of 3 outputs. Instead of having 1 balance, it's calculated based on all those. Okay. So then if I wanted to send you 0.75,
mm-hmm.
what would happen is I would create a transaction on the blockchain. This is for Bitcoin, for example. And I'd say basically, I want to send 0.75 Bitcoins out of that 1 Bitcoin unspent transaction output I have.
Okay.
Send 0.75 to Alexandra. And then also, I need to give myself change. So I'm going to say, and then I want 0.25 back.
Okay.
So then the outputs of that transaction are 0.75 Bitcoins to you, which is now your unspent transaction output. And then I have a new unspent transaction output of 0.25 in my wallet. So it's basically a way that you can keep track of balance without having to keep sort of this repository of everyone's balances, right? And it's just easier, and it's a lightweight solution to deal with that methodology.
Okay, right? Got it. Cool. Thank you, Digilight. Learned something. For someone new to the space, clearly explain the differences and divergence between first, second, and third generation cryptos and blockchain solutions, OG, BTC, Bitcoin, POW spin-offs, proof of work, smart contracts, proof of work,
stake. Okay, so
whoa.
Yeah, that's a big question.
How does this dude say he's new to the space? Like, so much.
He might not be. He's asking, if someone comes in and they're not sure.
Me. Okay.
So there are different generations of blockchain solutions, and obviously this has been sort of created by marketing teams within blockchain projects in general, saying, hey, we're the next generation. Everyone says that.
Yeah.
The reality is that the first sort of generation of a blockchain is the Bitcoin model, where it's a payments network. It's a truth network. You're keeping track of the state of a thing, and that is your Bitcoin balance, right?
Okay.
Then there's Ethereum that kind of came in and became this next generation, quote unquote, platform, where they introduced the core concepts of Bitcoin with an account-based model. And then they added this extra layer, which was smart contracts, which are basically just virtual machine run pieces of code that feed information to the blockchain. The key is that piece of code has to be run by every single node on the entire network, which is today nearly 40,000 or a little more than 40,000 computers. When you create a smart contract, all those computers have to run it. So it's like a big shared computer. That was the idea of a Generation 2 blockchain. Payments and a shared computing environment. Now these sort of Gen 3, these new blockchain environments that are sometimes calling themselves Generation 2, but I'm trying to keep this organized in at least my mind. You have these other platforms that have taken the lessons learned from what Ethereum has done and have said, we're going to improve on consensus. We're going to introduce sharded computing. We're going to introduce all sorts of random things that they think will make the blockchain more efficient, faster transactions, more security, more privacy, etc. That would be Generation 3. So I think you always just want to carve back the marketing when you have someone saying, oh, we're the next big thing. We can get 100,000 transactions per second right now. Not true. If someone had solved the problem of reaching network consensus at scale with 100,000 transactions per second, with complete anonymity and total security, we wouldn't even be having this conversation because they would already be taking the world by storm. Visa would already be half gone by now, and there aren't projects that are out there that have achieved that. Theoretical limits are one thing, real delivered solutions are another. So when you're going through, it's not one generation's better than the other. They all just have different approaches. So that's my answer.
What is sharding?
So sharding is...
I'm sorry, that's a really crappy name.
No, I know. People always laugh about that.
Like, what? Who chose that? Is
But
that
it's
the
like
Satoshi?
shard. A shard.
No, I get
Yeah.
you. Did Satoshi come up with that?
No, it's completely separate. I mean, sharding has been around for forever.
Oh, like...
It's like a computing concept.
Oh,
okay. But basically, it means that you break up the computational power, like power of the network.
Okay.
You break up all the load into little pieces. So if you have a
shards of glass.
Right. It's like shards of a network. Okay. So if you have 100,000 transactions per second feeding through one pipe, right?
Yeah.
It's going to get a little bit clogged.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
So instead of doing that, you can split it up into multiple pipes, and then you can reconcile it all at the end. So that's basically what sharding is it's creating a much easier path for larger volumes.
Cool.
Splitting up the load.
Isn't he a good teacher, guys? Because I think he is. Next. I love this, because this is like easy, good. Why is decentralization so important to the evolution of our society? Well phrased.
I think it's a natural evolution of what we've been doing for the last close to 100 years, I think, as technology has gotten better and more prevalent in our lives. I also am of the mind, though, that the goal of complete decentralization is a pipe dream. And it's not a pipe dream in that I am of the mind that people don't think that that's a great idea, but I think it's utopia. Because ultimately, when things go wrong, where do people look?
Yeah, you need some sort of authority.
People look to authority. And whether that's a true authority or whether that's people that you trust in your community, I mean, that's a different story. But complete decentralization where everyone has an equal say and everyone pretty much does whatever they want, it's been proven to just not work in theory. And even when you try and implement that, people sort of form their own structures where there's a hierarchy no matter what anyway. People will not actually stay fully decentralized.
Hashtag being human.
Right.
Fighting for
power.
So
the point is that decentralization is important, though, when it comes to business, when it comes to money, because the control of like key facets of society, like how much money gets printed and how we behave in a global economy as a society, should not be decided by a few people. It should be decided by everyone.
Praise be.
That's scary. But anyway, the reality is that when decentralization becomes more prevalent in society, which we've seen with the internet, information is now way more decentralized. That was the first sort of frontier of decentralization. You used to have to go to a library, go to a book, or go to a newspaper that was laced with complete opinion from a few people who were lucky enough to get published. That's one source of information, basically. You'd have the radio, you have news, whatever, those things were around. But the internet came along and now you have access to so many more opinions. You have access to information from other countries that you may not even be able to get where you live because there's censorship. Right? So to the point where the internet changed the game for information, blockchain is going to change the game in terms of decentralizing money and decentralizing business processes.
Agreed. So this is a good question, and I know I've asked you this before. What happens when all the Bitcoins are mined, besides everyone trying to attack each other and get Bitcoin? What happens?
Yeah, so I think this is a challenging one for a lot of people, and the answer is we don't truly know what will happen. But it is my belief that there are a couple of things that are in Bitcoin's favor when it comes to the time when everything is mined, and then there's no more mining rewards. That's the concern. How do we keep miners involved, keeping the network secure when there are no mining rewards anymore, right?
People aren't going to do it.
That's the way that people feel, but I actually think that the halvings and all of the scarcity that's built into the protocol, I think it was carefully calibrated to make it so that transaction fees alone when you go in, that even those fractions of a Bitcoin will be worth enough that miners could potentially sustain themselves on that alone.
Yeah, I guess it
right?
really depends on where we end at.
But I also think that the grand play here is that Satoshi, whomever or wherever that person or group is, or the aliens, the decision was let this decentralized community figure it out, right? How maybe it's a matter of over time when we start to get to that scarcity level, it's a pledge from the community that is the Bitcoin community that we're going to set aside a certain amount of Bitcoin to pay miners to secure the network. Or
Interesting.
everyone is going to start to participate more actively in the Bitcoin network. So mining is going to be more of a truly widely decentralized process because now big mining companies kind of dominate the space.
Yeah.
But though the one last thing, and this is more of, it's not even a conspiracy because it's not negative, but I think that it's possible that the Satoshi wallet, right, that has right now millions, if not close to, no, I think it's millions, maybe hundreds of millions of dollars worth of Bitcoin in there. It might even be more. But I feel like it's possible that Satoshi flew the coop, is not around but until that time, right? And if it's a human being, then Satoshi's probably not going to be alive necessarily when the final Bitcoin is mined. But ultimately, I think that it's possible that that wallet with all that Bitcoin was set aside for the time when no more Bitcoin's created and it's this nest egg for which we can pay.
So this person
miners.
Just thought of everything?
Right, but if, from my perspective, you think ahead that far, you know what this protocol is capable of. You would set aside something for when that day comes.
I guess so.
So that's my belief. I think that Satoshi wallet is set aside for when mining finally is no longer rewarded.
And I agree.
Cool.
Next. This is a good one. I totally did that. DigiLight running for president again. How can parents get their kids into coding and programming? Really good question. I'm just going to take this one for a second. I know in a lot of schools in Toronto, they had after 4 programs. So like once school is done, they would encourage, students to sign up. A lot of the times it was free too. And their parents would come pick them up later in the evening, and you'd have people teach students coding techniques. I did 1 or 2 of those classes. Wasn't very good. Wasn't my strong suit. More interested in soccer, but they really encourage that. I think it's pretty great. I know there's also a bunch of women's coding groups in Toronto that encouraged girls in elementary, middle, and high school to participate in coding, which I think is really, really important. And more needs to be done in that space. But what else? What do you think?
No, yeah, I'd agree with all of that. I think too that parents need to encourage their kids early on that they can do it.
Yeah.
Because I think it's like a second language, and it truly is, because when you go in, you learn to code per se. It's like learning to speak another language. You're learning to understand how computers think, right? And so a lot of people, I would say 90% of people sit down and look at it and don't understand it at all at first. It's all gibberish. But the reality is as you sit down and you have someone that really speaks your language, right? Then they can help demystify that process for you and help you understand why things are done.
Yeah.
But no matter how many years that I actually code, I always find problems every day that I don't know how to solve. And so it's finding a love and passion for solving problems all the time.
Yeah. No, I think it's cool. It'd be a frustrating process, but I think also the key is kind of like you said, languages. It's always easier to learn a language when you're younger.
Yeah, start them young.
Yeah, start them don't force any kids to do anything.
Yeah.
Not encouraging that, but I'm just saying, I think it was great. People are always encouraging me to do that if that was something I was interested in. I just happened not to be, and I wasn't very good at it. But having the option and knowing that's a thing, I think is kind of half.
There are just so many resources out there now.
Yeah.
The internet's full of it.
Yeah. All right. So, cannot pronounce your name. Sorry. What happens if China shut down mining? How long will it take for mining difficulty? Does the chain freeze then?
Okay, so if China moved to ban mining.
Why would they do that? I know they
China
like
does
censor a
things.
lot of stuff,
Who
but like,
knows?
but I have a question. Seriously, what's the advantage of them doing that? Like, what do they get out of that?
Control. I mean, Bitcoin is semi a threat to the status quo,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So it's like uncontrollable quote unquote money for China. They like to be able to have tight grip on what's going on.
Yeah.
I think most governments do.
Yeah.
But yeah, if China clamped down on mining and banned it altogether, I think it wouldn't be this thing where mining was legal the day before and then the next day the lights all go off and mining is illegal. It would take time, and so I think miners would then find another place to go. I also think that the network is insulated from that a little bit because there are mining groups elsewhere. China has a big proportion, but there are people out there that mine. And I also think it would be an interesting concept to see if China was out of the game, where the network goes in terms of where the next mining capability comes from.
Like what country you mean? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I have a question. Why is, because I mean, I've seen it like on like news and stuff, like these huge warehouses in China, and that's where they do it. Like, why is China super into it? Like, why isn't it Canada? Why isn't it Australia? Why isn't it? What, is it just because land is a lot cheaper there? Like, are people more into the technology there? Are they more invested in it than we are? Like, what is it that they're the ones doing the mining typically?
It started out, and I people can correct me if I'm wrong, but at least I was speaking to some miner folks at Consensus over the last like 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
That conference in New York, and they said the reason is because if you have these certain licenses and you have certain land in China, you get a really nice benefit that you get either like low to no cost electricity.
Oh.
So one of the main costs of mining are sort of out of the game, right? So now you have to deal with the hardware and rent and whatever and licensing, but you don't have to deal with electricity. Whereas in most countries, you're paying a fortune and it kills your profitability. So I feel that that's the reason why.
Yeah.
Also, China is a pretty technical country in general, so I feel that that's also part of it. But chain freezes can occur. So if it played out like people are saying in this question, where it's like one day Bitcoin mining is illegal, all of it shuts down at once, you have like a 50% drop in total hash rate or computing power on the network. Mm-hmm. The chain very well could and probably would freeze because
why?
The difficulty of mining, right?
Yeah.
That difficulty, the math puzzle, adjusts automatically, but on a cadence of X number of blocks. So it takes a little while for the protocol to adjust to that rapid decrease in total hash rate.
Gotcha.
So it's like using your Game Boy to try and solve a huge vector graphing puzzle on your, you could use a graphing calculator and it would take relatively little time, but if you try to use a Game Boy processor from like the 90s, it wouldn't work as well. So it's the same sort of thing. So yeah, chain freeze could occur. I just don't think it's going to happen that way.
Okay, cool. Alex, great name. Is it possible for Bitcoin's protocol to be changed to allow a larger supply than the current 21 million? That I've asked you before too, because can't this man, woman, child come out of the woods and be like, yo,
no,
more Bitcoin?
No control, because
can't they?
It's a protocol. So here's the thing. One of the things that comes out for people when they get into the space the first time, they're like, all right, first of all, why are there 3 different types of Bitcoin, right? So you have Bitcoin Core, right, which is the Bitcoin. Right?
Then there's like Bitcoin Cash.
There's Bitcoin Cash.
Yeah, I was like,
and
what?
Bitcoin Satoshi's Vision, right?
Have not heard of that.
Those are hard forks of the blockchain, because when you download an app on the App Store, right, you get an update. Eventually, you have no choice but to update, right? You can't just be like, nope, not updating, not doing it. Eventually they'll cut you off because they have a server and they don't want you running old
code.
code.
Like my iPhone. Like if I don't update, like all of a sudden my mom calls me, it's like I can't answer.
Right, so. They'll cut you off. They'll stop you because you have a central service with a central server that's going to tell you, hey, your version's not right. We're not talking to you, right? You're not getting information until you update. So with blockchain though, there is no central authority to say, hey, update or die, or update or you're not getting you're not getting XYZ. So if a protocol change happens, and that could be changing the mining process, changing the difficulty.
Can't we all can't there all be consensus that if people wanted there to be 30 million Bitcoin?
Yes, that's my point.
Yeah, so does every single computer have to agree?
No.
Like, do you literally click, yes, I consent? Like,
no,
how does it
but
work?
what happens is, like, Bitcoin Cash came out of a disagreement about consensus and block size and basic stuff about Bitcoin, right? And that created a fork where some people used the new protocol, which became Bitcoin Cash, and then other people said, no, this is the one that I like, and they stayed with Bitcoin Core, which is the original one.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
And there's all this debate over cryptographically which is the original chain.
Well, the one.
None of that matters. It's about the protocol. What protocol is original to the core scarcity values, the core values of how many Bitcoins there are, the block size, whatever. There are arguments for and against larger blocks to make it faster, right? There are arguments for and against introducing, cryptographic changes to mining. All sorts of things you could do. But because it's a blockchain, people are free to not agree and fork the chain. I wouldn't recommend it, but you can. So some people could say, we believe that Bitcoin should have a supply of 210 million instead of 21.
So they can just go off and be like, yo,
But
Coinbase.
enough people have to get on board. Miners have to get on board.
Can I ask you a question? How many people would have to agree?
It's arbitrary.
Well,
I mean, I could, theoretically, if I got 5 friends to go and
make a Bitcoin fork,
change the protocol and try and get other people to join in, we would technically have a fork of Bitcoin. It's just not as simple or easy as that to get it done, right?
Okay.
You have to have some support. So the protocol change would have to get some support.
I'd support you.
I would never touch it. The reality is that yes, it's feasible, yes, it's possible to change the supply, but no one person can do it, and it's very unlikely that the people who believe in Bitcoin will ever budge on that. Ever, ever, never, ever.
Stand your ground, peeps. Stand your ground. Next. This is the last one. Is the crypto assets class in blockchain an elaborate government scheme to usher in a classless economy to control the masses with AI dolls? Think we're gonna answer that?
Comic relief, the reality is...
His name is Woodgrain.
Woodgrain. Dope question. The answer is
I don't really know.
Unlikely. The reality is that whoever created it, if it was an attempt to control people, it was a pretty stupid one, because Bitcoin is one of those things, and crypto is one of those things that's very difficult to control. It's the same reason why crypto companies have not been attacked as directly by government bodies as Facebook has been when they pitched their own cryptocurrency, because there wasn't a whole lot of decentralization happening in the Facebook one. So there's one place where the government can go to attack it. Whereas if the government tries to go after an open source community of developers, they can shut the developers down, but ultimately the protocol is going to continue as long as other people are running that software. So it's really difficult to tear that network down.
Okay.
So I don't know why a government, no matter where they are, would decide we're going to create a protocol that's peer-to-peer, open source, and free for everyone in order to control you, because you can't really control it. So
cool. I think those are all the questions. Those are really good questions. I think I also asked some pretty good questions for non-technical people.
Right on. So guys, definitely throw any questions that we didn't get to today in the comments down below. You can tweet me, or you can leave me a message on my email. Wherever you want to send questions to, we'll factor that in for maybe this second round for this. I think these are pretty fun.
Let's do it.
And please do not forget to subscribe on YouTube if you're watching it there, to go ahead and like and subscribe to the podcast if you're on Spotify, Apple, Anchor, wherever you are listening. Thank you guys very much for all of the time, and I wish you all the best. Cheers.
Let's hash it out.